Arthur was an unusual man. He was willing to expose his inner self, which famous or hardworking people or proud people find hard to do. He worked on, like, I was an ugly duckling, and look what happened to me. Or how I became popular overnight. This kind of appeal that he started with his company with drew thousands and thousands of responses right from opening day. In fact, he started when he was in college, and a big article came out nationally saying, college student earns $15,000 a year, which in those days was in early 1900s. Those days, he was considered a very affluent man already as a college student. And when he put his company in action, organized it, he did okay creatively by opening little places and hotels and things where he sent talented people out. And he was anxious to do better. So to do better, he had to open a prime training area, which he opened in New York, obviously, which is the Big Apple, you know. And people started to wonder what it'd be like to go into this business at a time when there were not as many jobs as there were people, especially after World War II. Some of them even came in and trained under the GI Bill. Now that's a long way around to tell you that circumstances and Arthur's willingness to say, look what I've gained, had a lot to do with bringing people to him.
How did you come in contact with Arthur Murray?
I was in college, and I needed, at the beginning, fairly beginning student in college, I'd been aboard ship during war times and things, decided to go back to school, and obviously thought it might be a good idea if I got a job. So I was in the subway, riding into Center City, a major city, and I saw a classmate riding the same train. We were standing up, it was crowded. And he said to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm going into Center City, and I want to get a job for college. And he said to me, well, why don't you go where I work? I said, well, where's that? He said, Arthur Murray Studio. And I said, oh, what's that? He's pretty ignorant now, isn't it? He said, well, we teach ballroom dancing, and we have very wonderful students, and you can earn enough money to help you with college and so on and so forth. So I said, okay, and I went down by myself. And I must have looked about, I guess, 12 years old at the time, because our people are trained to be serious, talk to people seriously, make them feel welcome, make them feel comfortable. And I said to the receptionist at the school, am I too old to learn how to dance? After she almost fell off her chair laughing, she pulled herself together and said, we're going to start a training class soon. We'll have you interviewed for that. And that's how I started.
And what was your first meeting with Arthur Murray? What was your first impression of him?
My first meeting was in the early 50s, where we had a national convention in New York. And I went to it. Because I was performing well as an employee, they had me go to it. Met Arthur and Kathryn there, and was a fairly fair beginner then myself in trying to get a feel on the business. And the owner of the franchises that I worked for was a very fine gentleman. They had prepared a suite for him as an honorary guest, very lavish suite, at the Waldorf Astoria. There was a mistake in the bookings, and they gave me the suite. They gave him my room. With that, I met for a few moments with Mr. Murray after I had found out about it and apologized. And he said, well, what is, you know. Went on his way. And I said, this is an interesting man. So I started going into New York. It was at Madison Avenue, New York. And I started to get some training for myself and then to give some training I had learned in the studios I worked in. We had a reciprocal type of thing. And he would always stop by and look in the room. Remember, I was a young kid then. he would look in the room, and I usually was breaking some kind of a rule that he had in his studio, which I was not aware of. And he would say, hello, slam the door and walk away. And I would know that I had violated something that was a rule of his, but he was a nice enough guy, since I had come so far, not to mention it. And then I began to get attached to him. I began to like the man, and whenever I wanted to talk or volunteer or do extra work, I'd call him, do what you want.
I notice with people, I mean, I've interviewed another person who knew Arthur, and they still call him Mr. Murray.
Yes.
You refer to him that way as well. Did you always call him Mr. Murray, and why?
I called him Arthur when I talked to other people. When I talked to him, I said, Mr. Murray. Very serious man.
Did he like to be called Mr. Murray?
I have no idea. Never said a word. He was unpretentious, by the way, even though he was very serious. When we sat at his desk, he always had a rickety little desk that kind of shook. It was a cheap desk. In fact, one day he wanted to show me something. He pulled the drawer out, and it fell on the floor. We spent the next 10 minutes putting everything back in his desk. Well, that kind of forms a relationship, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, for sure. What did you find most interesting about the man?
He was, like I said before, he was willing to expose himself emotionally to get other people's attention so they would work on self-improvement. That takes a lot of courage. Most businessmen who are already making a fair amount of money don't want to show any weaknesses at all. He had no problem with it, which was very interesting to me. And when I took jobs on, which I did in the future, where I covered as many as 85 schools, running my own businesses and then volunteering to oversee 85 other ones, training-wise, business and dancing, and motivationally speaking, and customer service, which is a big thing in our company. Without customer service, we have not the same company we have. Customer comes first. I did those. I had to always report on what I did. And in 9 or 10 years, I did exactly what I thought was right for those schools, and he never said one negative word.
It's remarkable.
It's unbelievable that he wouldn't come in as a top man and press, push, correct. Never said a word. Doing fine, go ahead.
What did you notice the biggest with comparing he and Kathryn? How were they alike and how were they different?
To me, they seemed the opposite. He was serious, dedicated, and when he got in public, he played a very precise, proper role. She, when she got in public, went totally charismatic. She responded to the other people. She would be the life of the party. She would be up, happy, encouraging people to do things, starting stuff. Total opposite.
Did they make a good team?
Perfect, I think.
What about the children? Did you see Jane and her sister often?
No, I did not know them. They were always, I guess, somewhere else. Because my meetings for him were always at his studio, which was beautiful, by the way. And it was always there. And he was always so dedicated to what we were doing there. I met his brothers. I met one of his brothers especially, David, who was an attorney. And I met David's daughter, but I never met Arthur's.
What's your most vivid memory, Mr. Murray?
I don't know quite whether it's vivid or not, or would it be the most memorable story about him.
That would be great.
Yeah, most memorable story, and there's dozens of them, but the most memorable story, and again it goes to the person not minding being exposed on his weaker side, so to speak. Kathryn told the story about how she wanted a dress, a particular dress. And it was beautiful, and in fact it's in most of the pictures we have of her. It's a blue dress. She told the story of how it was very expensive and she did not like to spend a lot of money on clothes. She dressed up well, but was not a spendthrift. And he, of course, wasn't ever a spendthrift. And she said, Arthur, I want that blue dress. And it cost, like, at the time, $900, which, again, at that time was a lot of money. He argued with her and said she didn't need the blue dress. Now, she tells this story in front of him, which, again, I enjoyed. And he said, and in front of other people, by the way, he said, no to the dress. And he walked out of the room and closed the door. Now she felt bad that she upset him over something so superficial. All right? So she writes a note of apology saying she was sorry she upset him. It wasn't that important, but she did love this dress. This is Kathryn. It's typical Kathryn. She did love the dress, and if he bought her that dress, she'd never ask for another expensive dress. He comes back out of the room, says, let's go down and buy the dress. He goes with her to the store to buy the dress, and while she's talking to the salesperson and arranging for the bill, she turns around and sees him on the floor with the dress spread out on the floor, measuring the fabrics to see how much he was paying per yard for the silk. I think that's a very memorable story.
That's a very memorable story.
And she tells that, not only to me, but she tells it to other people, and he's fine with it. No problem.
How do you think the people in the studios, the teachers, that they reacted to Kathryn and
You know, his reaction would have been different. You mean all the his own school? I have to go.
Yeah, the people who work.
The action would be different than maybe another high-ranking employer would have, because he always continued to take lessons himself, his whole life, till he passed away.
Why do you think he did that?
He loved it. He loved it.
Now, how would you appraise him as a dancer?
He was very, very technical, almost like an engineer. The footwork had to be perfect and precise. The body position had to be perfect and precise. The hand motions were studied. So some people thought he looked mechanical. That was just his personality and the way he approached things.
What impact do you think Mr. Murray has had after all these years on the evolution of ballroom dancing in this country?
He started, first of all, he built the biggest company of his type ever built in the world. People don't realize that. They think of their own locations. But this is a worldwide organization considered humongous for the type of field it is. And he created this organization. And he helped create franchising. He was one of the inventors of franchising. There was only one company franchising at all, a little bit, when he started franchising. And that was, I believe, A&W or something.
Well, what about he even did infomercials? I mean, his first program he paid for.
Yes.
And how did that, when you look back at that, what did you think of the TV program?
He started funding his own, see, this is a little bit of a misconception too, because it became a legal issue. He started funding his own shows. Then he got a sponsor. And it was the first time that a sponsor had ever sponsored another business. Sponsors don't sponsor each other, but they did. And after a while it became, you couldn't do this anymore. Either the rules changed or the FCC rules changed. I don't know what caused it, but you were not allowed to do that anymore after his show.
What did you think of the program?
The dance
party, the Arthur Murray party.
Oh, it was extremely popular, and it started so many famous people. A terrific amount of people who became famous later started on his program. I think Johnny Carson was, Merv Griffin, and Merv Griffin stayed friends with him for life. And I can't name them all, but there are a bunch of them started on his program. So it was a very powerful program.
What do you think that did a lot to help with the growth of the company?
The growth? Absolutely. Absolutely. Made him a household, name or word.
So what about the style of dancing? What do you
Oh.
think of the way it started and the way it is now?
When I started, and other people who've been in a long time might tell you the same thing, it was authentic, more authentic to the country it came from. Samba from Brazil was samba as they do it in Brazil. The strongest country for putting forth Latin dancing was Cuba. And as a kid, I used to go to Cuba to practice and study many times. In fact, I was in Cuba when Castro marched into town. And so were other people from our company. And then England got involved in the competitive type of dancing. Europe did. England came in very strongly on it. And then they refined these company ethnic dances into competitive material that, frankly, I think is much more physically strenuous and takes a lot more training. But it is now a field of its own, and you see it in various TV shows and things. And it's a powerful way to compete and compare. You can't compete people in a large organization like we are, and we have thousands of competitors. You can't compete this person doing one style of dance and this person doing another style of dance. They have to be trained to be competitively challenging to each other.
Did you ever think, when you walked into that studio many years ago, that you would have had the type of career that you've had?
Not at all. I was going to go into industry.
So how would you talk about your career? What has it meant to you?
Well, it meant 60 years of a good time dealing with a lot of terrific people, staff, managers, and students. I don't expound on it because it's not proper, I feel, but I had in my first short career as a teacher, which is considered short compared to my longevity in the business, I had worked with maybe some of the most powerful industrialists in the world were my clients. All household names.
Did you learn things from those people?
Yes. I learned it just like everybody else. One famous woman I reprimanded too strongly started to cry. Then I didn't know what to do. I stood there like, what do I do now?
What did you do?
So I consoled and said to her maybe there was too much work involved in her trying to remember all this stuff with this international business she was part of, and she probably should take a little notebook. Now remember, I was a student myself in school trying to change the world, and she said, do you think that would help? And I said, yes, it will increase your memory if you write down some of the stuff you have to remember for your next lesson. So the next lesson, she came in with her secretary. You know, what do? You're a young kid and you look at this, you go, oh.
Did it work for her?
No, I broke it up. I had to. It would have been a complete fraud.
Do you think dancing led to both Mr. Murray's and Kathryn's longevity?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Even when he was retired, one of our people would talk to him on the phone, even to wish him a happy birthday, and he would bring up something about their business. Amazing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Was he pretty healthy, and she, most of their life?
She, in her younger years, had some issues. She overcame by being one of the most popular women in the country. And I don't know whether he wanted to be personally popular. He was stated in his behavior. He had very rigid rules that he hated to break. Once in a while he'd break them. If he liked you a lot and he knew that you were a punky, what he called the cheeky kid. I was the cheeky kid, okay? Hard to believe now, right? He liked that, but he didn't want too many of them around. You know, one was enough.
Has dancing helped you live a long and healthy life?
Oh, I think so. We won't know for a while yet, but
So far, so good?
it's so far so good.
What is the most significant thing that dancing has contributed to your life?
I think physically is a very underestimated part of dance training. We have taken people with severe arthritic and joint pain that could barely walk. We've taught them to dance, and I saw this. And the satisfaction I got out of seeing this was even greater than the ones who I did television shows with, which I did as a young man. And I did it with students. I didn't take professionals, and they were so good. There was a lot of satisfaction in taking someone you trained into a major network show. But it was much more satisfaction seeing a cerebral palsy victim, for instance, get a silver medal and dance well. Or a person with severe arthritic, frozen body almost, hips and all, become good dancers and loosen up. That's the part that is the most inspiring.
Do you think Dancing with the Stars has had a major impact?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. You know, we're closely associated with a lot of those people. I don't know whether you're aware of that or not. They were trained by our people in some cases, especially at the beginning, and they've done very well on it. And some of them actively worked for our company. So we feel a closeness there, and we feel a real urge to promote that. And I see what they've done that I think is great, bringing your athletic people and your people that you would not expect to be willing to expose themselves like Arthur did in a field where they could look foolish among a lot of people, and they all do so very well. They become dedicated, and they do well. That can't do anything but help you throughout the general populace. It's got to help you.
You know, so many people, you look at someone dancing and it's lovely and it looks like it's so easy. But dancing is, would you say, is a challenging sport activity?
It's a physically challenging sport. The idea is to not make it that hard if you're a general student. Someone who's going in for fun, a little confidence socially, health. You don't want to make it that challenging for those people. You want to take them up slowly. Because in my mind, the biggest sin that a teacher has in our field, and good teachers in our field are scarce. We have to really train and look for them and train. Biggest sin they have is if they teach too much too soon.
Has dancing added a lot of fun to your life?
Oh, yes. Almost all the connections I've made socially around the world have been either because of this or on the edge of it or directly because of it.
Did Mr. Murray ever express to you how he felt about what he had created, he and Kathryn had created?
I don't know if he expressed it directly. He was not a toot-your-own-horn guy. He was too private for that.
Do you know how he felt about leaving the business when he retired?
Yes, I do, because I was the one who talked to him about his retirement. I was the first person that talked to him. That's where the cheeky comes in.
So how did that go?
Not too well. He had given hints, excuse me, that he had given hints to where he might be thinking about retirement. There was no real defined line here. And I had overseen so many schools, and I was so proud of the fact that he let me do it on my own. I, of course, thought, well, the world's going to be easy. It shows you how much we have to learn. So I asked for an appointment, and he said, fine, come on in. I went into New York to his office, and I talked about what we had been doing a little bit, not much. He knew already. And in fact, he used to ask me sometime to take video cams with me to film, and I'd always say, I'm too busy, I can't do that, because I was working by myself. So he said, what is it? I said, well, Mr. Murray, and that's as far as I got. He said, Mr. Masters, if you're going to tell me that Kathryn and I have worked for many, many years, we've done well, we have the financial ability to do anything we want, that we should retire and enjoy the rest of our lives, forget about it. My whole talk.
So why'd you do that?
I said, oh, no, I wanted to talk about the new Browns program and the new chart. I think maybe what was I going to do? I left. And about a month later, I got a phone call. And he said, about that retirement, I decided I am going to retire. And I need a team put together. And he specifically said of about 7 people. Specifically said the number of people he would like to have come in to run the company.
And how long have you been involved in running the company?
In the parent company,
Mm-hmm.
we took it over in 1964.
Has that had challenges?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It always does. The faster you grow, the greater the challenges. And we grew pretty fast, and especially in the last 5 years, grown tremendously. Has to do with the world getting more involved in competition dancing, social dancing, a lot of TV play, even ads showing dancing. Everything shows dancing. So that did affect our growth. And I forgot the question. I'm sorry.
But you know, I forgot it too.
Say that.
We'll try another one. Now we've covered everything here.
Yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to add about Mr. Murray, Kathryn, a story that I haven't asked you?
Well, obviously, I owe a lifetime to them because of coming in frivolously into the business, working to go into industry. I was going to go into the business, and we do the testing in industry. We do the standard test, the judgment test, the intelligence test, the interest inventories. I was going to do all that stuff, which is boring. But that's what I kind of got interested in. A college professor talked me into leaving graduate school to stay with Murray's.
That's great.
And so it created a lifetime.
So how long will you continue to stay before you retire?
Well, I'm trying.
Can I come back in 2 months?
Yeah, I'm very active, actually, but I think when you're active, the pride you have when you've been in it as long as I have been is not about yourself anymore. It's about the people who are doing the job with you now and going to do it in the future. That is what your main, not a worry, not a preoccupation. It is something you want to see happen that you feel good about.
I agree. You know what? I think we're good. Are you good?
I'm good.
So did we do okay?
We did fine.
Do you think we covered?
There's a million more things, but you don't
Well,
have to.
tell me more.
No,
Is there
no.
more? Is there more that you can add to this that I haven't asked you about?
No.
Anything you want to talk about
No,
would
no.
be.
Unless you want to pick pieces of it out,
Yeah, but I mean, I can add things. I mean, is there anything more about Mr. Murray that you'd like to share? I mean, it can be stories, anecdotes, whatever.
Well, Mr. Murray's a funny thing. When I became what they call regional director or area director of a large northeast area, from down lower Virginia up through Canada and across and down, large segment of the United States, where most of our schools were, Mr. Murray used to come to my meetings.
He did.
That was, at the time, I thought it was something that just was routine. And as I thought later about it, I said, wasn't that something? I'd have Arthur there, short time, give some talk, join, chat before and after, and his brother stay for the whole meeting, and his brother's wife. And I couldn't help but reflect back and say, you came from a country road, through college, through a city, to New York's office, where I did not work in the office. There was others that did. But because of the relationship with the office, took over a major part of the company, overseeing it, while you made your own living in your own businesses. And to me, I would sit down once in a while and just say, to me, it was even not believable.
Did you ever dance on the Arthur Murray Party
No.
program?
We had our own TV show in another city, and I did a lot of that, putting it together and appearing on it.
Did you enjoy TV?
TV was live then. There was no taping, and it was pretty strenuous live. I can give you some examples of the strenuousness. I would stage a international waltz, which is very fast. The Viennese waltz, very fast one. Took a lot of work, and like you see on Dancing with the Stars, back-breaking preparation. And I would stage it so that the TV studio had curtains and a stage. And the curtains would come almost closed. And the woman partner would be here, I'd be here. When the music would start, we'd come together in the opening, go forward to the cameras, okay, and do this fast Viennese waltz. Well, she's there, I'm here, curtains are open, and they play a samba. We had no work done on the samba. We knew how to do it, but we had no routine, no nothing, and we're on TV at the front of the stage, and we got to make a decision to fake it for a whole record. So now I storm back to the fellow who plays the records next week, and I get a crayon and I go through one side of the LP and say, you play this side. We do the same act. We're behind the screen of the curtains. The record's on, everything is fine. It's the right record. Music starts on the wrong speed. High speed. Almost broke a leg. Faking another Sunday night prime time. Okay? This is some of the things that happen when you're in this business that you have to learn how to handle. Next time, they asked me to interview some people. So I prepared Georgia Gibbs, who was popular at the time, to sing a song. She goes up to the mic and doesn't sing a song. What's wrong? She says, I don't want to sing a song. I want to do a mambo. That was one. Another singing group that I'll remain nameless because we really had it out. 4 tremendous singers were going to lip sync on the show. I was setting up the show. They were going to lip sync. And they're ready to go on. It's live. They won't go on. They're not going to sing, mind you. They're just going to sing to the record. And they said, we're not going to go on. We have 4 guys, and there's only 3 mics. You're not going to sing.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. I'm pulling my hair out and screaming, you know. So these were an education. This was an education of all educations. And it goes on from there. The other memorable time was we were at a big national convention, and I introduced the twist with Kathryn.
You did what?
I introduced the twist. Now, it had been introduced elsewhere, socially, but to our company. She and I did the twist, and that was fun, because she's very, vivacious.
But she was really quite a good dancer, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was good. She's very mobile. I mean, the way they threw her around, and even in the dances she and I did, I mean, it's physically, trying. And she's great. She was very, very flexible, very, went along with her personality.
But she really wasn't an entertainer per se when she started doing the TV show, was she?
No, no, she hadn't. Oh, he told her, you're going to do it. And he said, what? She said, what? Oh, yeah, we're going to use you. That happened. Now, I think, if I recall, she had been a school teacher before she married him.
And she became an amazing entertainer.
Yeah, prime. Well loved, by the way.
How did he really put her out in front a lot, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Well, that's him. That's the way he is. And he wanted everything to be proper all the time. If he felt he couldn't do it beautifully, he'd have somebody do it. He wanted to know how they were dressed. He wanted to know how they had their hair cut. He wanted to know what they looked like, how they acted. Or you'd exile them to another school.
So when you were working in a studio, were the dress and behavior regulations pretty strict?
Same as his.
Same
Shirt,
day?
tie, every day, morning till night. Dress, shine shoes, inspections. Women executives dressed beautifully. No casual dress. In fact, some of our students that I mentioned to you, who were basically well-renowned as industrial people, the heads of industry, would leave a jacket, special blazer, hanging in our closet so that when they came in for their lessons, they would go get their blazer, hang their suit jacket up, put their dance blazer on with their dress code, and take their lesson. Finish, go back, hang their jacket up, and put on their suit and go back to the office.
What do you think dancing adds to the social civility of our culture, our lives?
There was a period of time where it was phenomenal, I could say that. It dominated the social aspects of our lives. Then all of a sudden, so many years, including up till now, it's gotten very casual. And my theory is, and I was going to go into industrial psych, is that people behave a lot like they dress. I never saw Mr. Murray without a tie. I never saw him without a jacket. And I had years in the business. And his staff and our staffs were always that way. I think that one of the things we did, I instituted a lot of children's classes. That's why I so much admire what Pierre is doing in several cities. And we had up to 100 children in a class. And the parents would come up to that building, wherever the classroom was. It could be a church, it could be a civic hall, and they would almost push their kids out of the car and take off. And I was wondering why they didn't come in and be a little social or whatever. They finally told me, you're taking 100 children, 5th and 6th grade, into one room. They're going to destroy the building. And we don't want any part of this. Parents used to flee. They'd come back at the end of the class, after 2 hours, the end of the class, and they'd see these little monsters they thought of as monsters in a receiving line saying goodbye, thank you so much for the afternoon, leaving and going to their parents' cars. They were stunned.
Would you like to see more children dancing today?
Oh, absolutely. Especially around starting at the 5th and 6th grade levels in the school system.
Well, what do you think the difference would be if there was more dancing for children?
They would learn how to interact with each other better because we had young ladies sit over there, the young boys sit over here. The boys are all dressed. The young ladies were dressed. They were taught how to sit properly. They were taught how to go over and ask for a dance properly, how to escort them back. These are kids that an hour ago were tearing the neighborhood apart. But when they got there, they got into an ambiance that encouraged them to behave in that way. And if we can get more of that, especially in that 5th, 6th grade level, that's my opinion, because among the things I did at college was I decided to get a teaching degree for self-improvement. I thought it'd be a great self-improvement thing. So I enjoy working with the young ones and used to volunteer teaching summer school and such, you know, because for nothing, no pay. I never got paid as a school teacher, but I taught. And I really think that that is the magic grade level, 5th and 6th grade.
You think this really it can make such an impact that it can change the direction of a child's life?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. I've seen it. There's no need for them to go hang out in goofy stuff.
If you had your life to live over again, would you do anything differently?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Some of the things took a little longer than I think they should, because I didn't get the concept. Maybe I could have gotten it maybe a little faster. But I was doing, you know, a lot of schooling and a lot of this. 6, 7 years in college is a lot of studying while you're working full time.
Do you still dance?
I do. I like it. I especially like the Latin dancing. Never left me. I twisted my knee a little bit, not dancing, lifting something stupidly. So I had a little treatment on that, which took me out of the field for about a year, I guess. But I still, even if I make it short, I still happy to cut in and have a little fun.
Has it made you healthier and happier?
Yes, I think so. I think so. Keeps you active and it keeps your mind working. I'll tell you that. There's a new aspect of it every few minutes.
So there's research that this helps people with Alzheimer's or preventing Alzheimer's and dementia. Do you?
I've heard that, and I've even heard it from some medical directions. I think it's the attentiveness to what you're learning, having this down track, backed by the physical. I think the physical has a lot to do with the person's, the stimulation that you get from physical has a lot to do with the person's psyche. And I think that having to remember and having to be brought back to memory things while you're doing something physically, I don't see how it can do anything but help.
So how long do you think you'll stay?
I don't know. My job right now really is to get a lot of people, do a lot of good things, hopefully, and then let them do it.
And as long as you're enjoying it.
Oh, sure. I look forward to going in. I look forward to going into schools. I go by myself. I don't go with an entourage. I walk into school, meet students, staff, if they want to have an hour of meeting, have an hour. If not, just socialize. Make some comments on what may help them in the school that they're too used to looking at, and maybe would look a little better if they did this, and the other,
Really, do you think enough people understand what a wonderful career dancing can be?
They're getting more and more to that state. And I got to tell you something that would have been hard for me to admit years ago. But the European champions and dedicated dancers who had the world in their hands have joined Arthur Murray's. And I think that has been a great example for our everyday people who are very talented, but not world champions. Let's face it, there's only a few of those. Seeing this happen and those people become successful and dedicated to our business has been a real important issue to me.
Okay. Have we covered it?
Yeah.
You're wonderful.
Well, thank you.
I don't know why you would just see the red light. You got it? Okay.
One day, I had this brilliant idea that I was going to be a video director, and I was going to shoot my own films. I got this beautiful room. It was one of our studios, but I took one of the smaller rooms. It was so attractive. And I had 4 or 5, I think 5 of the top people in the country come in and give talks and also do dance demonstrations. I came up with a clever idea, because the room was too small, of shooting it in the mirror. We did the final tapes, and as they said, go forward on your left, they were going forward on their right. Everything was reversed. The whole tape, 2-3 hours of it, was reversed.
So what did you learn from that?
I learned to go get a very clever engineer and have him reverse the reversed tape. It took me weeks. I felt like such an idiot.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Can you see people, our top people standing up and saying, now you go to the right, and they're going to the left?
You know, you would never think of that.
No,
You would never think
entered my mind.
You dealt with it.
Oh, Arthur had no problem saying that something was stupid. He was a man of few words. By the way, he stammered a little bit, which I kind of got used to, and a lot of people know him, got used to it too. He would not stutter, but he would start off, Phil, then he'd get into it. But he used to talk about things that he thought were dumb. If a person was doing something he thought was really dumb, he didn't care whether it was in a meeting or he didn't care whether it was in the studio, but he would look at them and try and make an impression on that they had done a dumb thing. And so he'd look at them and say, and this person might be a phenomenal dancer, by the way. He'd pipe up with something like, some of the dancers do these dumb things because they have their brains in their feet. It struck me funny.
Did you learn a lot from him?
I learned as much watching him as I did talking to him. I learned a lot about the business from his brother, who was a lawyer and full-time in the dance business. I spent a lot of time watching Arthur Murray work and talking to him on the phone, and I wrote releases that ostensibly came from him, but I wrote them for our area, for the 85 schools I ever saw. Never changed any of them. But I watched how he operated, how he gives lead, he gives rein. I watched that. That was very impressive to me as someone who could have been slapped around a lot as a cheeky young kid, you know. So, you know, it was an education for me. Just watching him operate was an education for me. And he made his appearances only specific moments, the right time. I could go in his office and sit at the desk and talk to him. And by the way, if you told him you liked his necktie more than once, he would give it to you, which was very unusual. But I would watch him, and he'd put in a rule, but I never saw him go out and chastise anybody about it. He might have done it for the people who worked for him, but he didn't with us that did a lot of volunteer work. He was smart enough to let us learn and do the work. And I thought I learned how to do that. It was hard for me to delegate. I used to do everything myself. I would do the management, the supervising, handle the students, be dance director, do the TV shows. I learned it doesn't work that way. I'd have been long gone if I'd kept that up.
So he taught you the fine art of delegation.
Yep. And letting people do it. And not embarrassing them if they make a mistake, which he sometimes did because his time was shorter than mine. I got the time to go through it in a longer gist.